amazing distinctions that our alumni have made, the accomplishments of our students, the dedication of faculty mentoring students, and the efforts of students and faculty in making this program so vibrant. Before we start presenting the specific awards, I'd like to say that, of course, those who are being recognized truly do deserve the honors that we're presenting, but there was really stiff competition for every award. And I would recommend giving still more awards were this not already a kind of a long event. And I'm sure your stomachs will soon be grumbling for the fantastic spread upstairs. I don't want to actually start those salivating glands already, but it's catered by a fantastic Middle Eastern restaurant called Eons, and I don't think we want to wait eons for eons. But I do want to recognize the amazing contributions of the students, faculty, and alumni who were nominated for awards but were edged out, as well as those who humbly do so much for the program and do so well without being nominated, or seeking out the incredible blazing glory of one of these plaques that we will be giving out. You really are all stars in my eyes and are appreciated. I'd also like to thank Earl, who's in the back of the room, for doing an incredible job organizing the event. I mean, we'll see if I screw up, then we can blame him. But it is just an amazing, an incredible amount of work with so many awards and the whole balloting process and everything that, and the assemblage of food. Really, we couldn't do it without the incredible effort that you give. I'd also, if we had a program APO award, we know who would get it. Suspense wouldn't be so great. I'd also like to thank Allison for her leadership and amazing and tireless work that she does for the program, which can be seen in big and small ways. Really in every dimension of the program, including this event. Were not for her, we wouldn't be giving honors for MA theses and for student citizenship. I think those are really important contributions just in the few years that she's been EO. And I'm also really grateful for the opportunity to be more involved in the program over the past 4 years by being DEO and getting to do this, organize and participate in this event. I'm going to be stepping down at the end of this year as DEO to pursue some exciting opportunities back at Queens College on the departmental P&B committee. I'll truly miss being one of Allison's work wives, as she called me and Charles at the last award night. And her view of us might explain why I get texts at 6 in the morning about how our admissions yield is doing 3 weeks in advance of the notification dates. But I'm looking forward to a amicable work divorce. And at least if I get some visitation rights. Our first honoree this evening is Professor Bernd Reiter, who completed his dissertation here back in 2003 under Ken Erickson and Lenny Markovitz, who was a member of the committee. And I'd like to ask Ken and Lenny to come up and say a few words and present the award to Bernd, and then Bernd is going to give us a 30-minute talk, which I think is a press use of a forthcoming book, or work in progress? No? Okay, sorry. But he'll explain what it's about. And Ken and Lenny?
And we divided our tasks. Lenny's going to go first with goodbye word. I spoke too long. Lenny's going to go first with an exhortation, and then I'll make some comments.
Okay. Ken was Bernd's sponsor, and he decided to divide our very, very limited time up between the two of us. So Ken is going to speak 100% about Bernd, and I'm not going to speak about him at all. For reasons that will become clear, I think, only after Bernd gives his talk. Bernd was kind enough to share his talk in advance with Ken and myself. And I think it's one of the most impressive personal statements I have seen any of our students with faculty. And so I would just like to say a couple words about something that might seem totally extraneous. And the key, what I want to say is $7,000. $7,000, which is the amount that the union is asking for adjuncts. And while this is not really an appropriate time to talk about political matters, it really is.
It is.
Because it affects the education and the status of all of us. And in the past, the union tried incremental increases. They would ask for 10%, and the administration would offer 3%, and some of them 5%, and this was percentages of nothing. Now the union is asking for $7,000 a course, which is like a qualitative increase. And it could be a real game changer in the whole nature of what happens to adjuncts in higher education throughout the whole country. So I think that that's really a vital demand. And it bothers me constantly that senior faculty seem not to support what happens to our adjuncts, even though they're both our students and a vital part of our whole education. So I just wanted to use this occasion to say something positive about this particular demand, and I think you will see how it keys in with what Bernd has to say. And Bernd's statement, I think, is a cause of real pride to Ken and myself, and it will be, I think, to all of us.
The adjuncts among us seem quite pleased with your comment. I'd like to talk a little about Bernd, since he was my student and I have real pride in Bernd's work. But first I want to just indulge myself for a second to say that this annual awards ceremony is one of my favorite events in our graduate program, where we can really take pride, recognize the accomplishments that we, faculty and our students, who will later be faculty, are achieving. And so I feel very good about it, and of course I feel especially good because it's one of my students, our students, who is the awardee, distinguished alum this time around. And I also want to say it's been such a pleasure working with Lenny, because we've done a number of dissertations together. I just want to recognize that too. So that's my personal aside. Now some comments on Bernd, the person, and Bernd's values. Bernd came to us in the Graduate Center applying from Brazil, which is one of the reasons that I was interested in him from the beginning. He had an MA in political sociology from the University of Hamburg. And he, in lieu of doing military service in Germany, he chose to do civilian service, avoiding military activities. And he worked in Latin America, in Colombia, and in Brazil, working with NGOs and social movements that dealt with the most underprivileged, marginalized, and poorest peoples. And so this is the way he did better service than being in the military. And it also taught him or led him to decide to go on for a PhD so he could understand the root causes of political inequality and marginalization and things like that. And I happened to be on the admissions committee the year he applied to our program. And I read this and I said, wow. So I immediately sent him an email and said, please, think of us. We have lots we can offer to you. Consider coming to us, which of course he was considering it because he had applied already. And he did come, to my pleasure at the time and my enduring pleasure afterwards. And so I'm so grateful that we had Bernd in our program there. From his experience in Brazil and then his dissertation research, he developed projects that focus on justice versus injustice, inclusion versus exclusion, equality versus inequality, citizen participation versus authoritarian rule, and on identifying and analyzing examples of democracy that can work to serve the needs of the majority. And so his work combines empirical concerns and methods of comparative politics, but it also includes the normative concerns of political theory. You can see this very much in his work. And he is, as a comparative politics type, we can be proud that he has researched and written on countries in Latin America, Europe, and Africa. So that's pretty comparative too. He has written a good deal. He wrote 3 books on his own, plus 1 co-authored book, coordinated 5 edited collections into which he also contributed chapters, and has written 35 peer-reviewed articles and book chapters. So there's a lot of very interesting material that Bernd has produced. And while I have a long CV of his here, I'm not going to read the CV to you, but I am going to read you a couple of terms from the titles because they reflect Bernd's interests and integrity. And so here's one that speaks to his career, a book titled Bridging Scholarship and Activism, Reflections from the Front Lines of Collaborative Research. Another, The Democratic Challenge, Democratization and De-Democratization in Global Perspective. Another, The Dialectics of Citizenship, Exploring Privilege, Exclusion, and Racialization. Negotiating Democracy in Brazil, The Politics of Exclusion. That's the book that came out of the dissertation that we advised. Brazil's New Racial Politics is another that shows the kinds of concerns he's got. And then Framing Non-Whites and Producing Second-Class Citizens in France and Portugal. And then one that shows how you can get an eye into politics with the sorts of things that don't speak to normal middle-class kind of perspectives. This is an article titled Embracing Hip-Hop as Their Own, Hip-Hop and Black Racial Identity in Brazil. And so Bernd's research is geographically diverse, but focuses on issues of justice and injustice and participation. And then Bernd sent me an email this week before he came here with the good news that he had just been selected to edit a new Routledge special decolonization book series. A quote from Bernd in the email to me: "We'll identify books that have the status of classics in different countries and languages of the world and translate them into English so they can find a broader audience. The basic idea is that we want to go against the idea that theory is only produced in the global north and then applied in the global south." So Bernd has a lot to offer, and he is now, actually, Lenny, we're supposed to Bernd, come up and receive your award.
Yeah, you have a nice look. My wife hasn't told me you have.
So get one of the two of us. Step out of the projector. Is this helping?
No.
We're going to go after this. Okay.
We'll do it at the schmooze steps.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much. You're really too kind. So I prepared a speech for this, and I will try to deliver it now. I want to thank, of course, the CUNY Grad Center and the Political Science Program. I want to thank Alison Cole and Peter Lieberman and Earl Leary for inviting me, for making this possible for me, and I'm really deeply honored and thankful for this award. Thank you so very much. I'm a very proud alum of the City University of New York's Graduate Center. I'm particularly proud because this is a public school. I grew up in Germany in a single mother household, in a small town in a village where almost nobody finished high school. And I'm the first member of my family to even attend college, let alone finish it. I am where I am today because I attended excellent public middle and high schools in Germany. I was able to attend college because it was public and free. And while attending the CUNY Grad Center from 1998 to 2002 was not entirely free, CUNY still afforded me the opportunity to earn my way through college by teaching at Brooklyn College and by working as a research assistant for Marilyn Detail. I would not have made it without the generous support I received from her, from Lenny Markowitz, and from Ken Erickson, who always was and continues to be my most enthusiastic supporter and advocate for any grants, fellowships, and alumni awards out there. I remember that he once came to the Grad Center shortly after he had an operation, apparently against the advice of his wife and his doctor, only to make sure that I received financial support for the program. I cannot thank him enough. Ken has certainly become my hero and my role model for the kind of professor and mentor I want to be when I grow up. I also am very indebted to the continuous and generous support I received from my other professors here. Fodye Kojo, Marshall Berman, Asha Arian, Howard Lentner, Richter, Francis Fox Piven, John Bowman, Mark Blasius, Thomas Wies, and Michelle Fine from across the aisle. Lenny in particular was and continues to be always ready and extremely quick in reading my scribbling, offering comment, praise, constructive critique, and at times endorsement. I remember all of them fondly as extremely kind and generous professors and mentors, and I'm deeply and forever grateful for their support. When I look back at my time in New York, as someone who coming to the United States for the first time to pursue grad studies, I'm well aware that my success was due to a collective support system in place where such support mattered and could make a difference. For my first semester, I lived in the CUNY student residency on 44th Street between 6th Avenue and Broadway. Later, I moved to Central Harlem, which gave me even more a sense that this place was all about hard work, new beginnings, and opportunities. When I came here, I came from Brazil, where I had spent the past few years working as a social worker and involved in slum urbanization and educational projects for marginalized Black youth. I had attended college in Brazil as well, for a year, again, in a public university supported by the German government. I always perceived education to be the great equalizer. Free public education was my way out of the village and to some extent out of the idiocy of rural life, to quote from the Communist Manifesto. I learned about topics in school that were never discussed at home. Education was also my path to conquer the world. I attended a free public university in Brazil, generously supported by a need-based German government student loan, and I was able to attend a PhD program in New York City because the CUNY system allowed me to progress and succeed without having the means and resources to do so. Public education allowed me to enter spheres and positions in life that were not meant for me, it seemed. Since graduation, I only had one academic job. I have been a professor at the University of South Florida, in Tampa, another large public university since 2005. My experience in this country thus has been one of attending and working in public schools, making progress, advancing through different ranks, and living a good life, even becoming an American citizen, thanks to public education. I owe a great deal to public education, and I value it greatly. Public education allowed me to live the American dream, making it without regard of my origins and family background, based on my own efforts, at times working several jobs while pursuing my PhD. Dreaded education, it turns out, makes you more self-aware, and I started to learn and think more about my path, my successes, as well as my failures, connecting them to social science theories and concepts. During my initial years of studies here, I learned that while my own efforts certainly counted and were important, I did have some symbolic capitals I brought with me, easing my way. As a white, German, heterosexual male, my initial encounters with professors tended to be very positive. Nobody ever thought that I was lazy, stupid, or undeserving. I always encountered open doors and open arms, and many people willing to help and assist me. After some years, however, I had to learn about and experience the other side of public education in this country, a side I had not been familiar with. In Germany, there are very few private universities to begin with, and public universities are not ranked and don't compete with each other. So it does not matter where you get your degree from in Germany. All public universities are perceived as the same, offering the same level of prestige once you graduate. It took me some years to understand that this is not the same in the United States. I had to learn this lesson gradually and somewhat painfully, whenever I applied for positions at prestigious universities. Every time I applied and was not selected, I realized that the job was given to someone with a degree from Harvard, Yale, Princeton, or Cambridge, or another top private school. At times it seemed that people graduating from programs at private schools that I knew were not as good as mine were still favored over me, even though their publication records and experiences seemed to be lower than mine. Grant applications seemed to follow a similar pattern. What is going on here? I had to ask my American wife a few times over the past years, as I kept applying for more and more competitive and highly selective opportunities and not getting them. My wife is wiser than I am, and so are most of my colleagues at the University of South Florida. So by listening to them and her, I came to understand little by little what is going on here. So let me share these insights with you and submit them to your thought and critique. It appears to me that this country is slowly losing its faith in public things. Public schools, public office, public space, abandoning them and favoring instead private schools, privatized public office holders, and privatized public spaces. It also seems that elitism has crept into the very fabric of American society, culture, and politics, threatening to undermine the very foundations of this country. Let me explain. I first became suspicious of this trend here at CUNY. I had a professor, who shall remain unnamed, who kept mentioning his accolades from private universities. Instead of proudly working here, he kept referencing Columbia University or similar others. He made no secret about the fact that his children attended a private Ivy League university, mostly making me angry, but also making me question for the first time if being here was the right decision. I then learned that all recent presidents of this country went to the same private universities. In an article in The Atlantic published in 2016, written by Leo Wong, I read that, and I quote, Amy, the daughter of President Carter, became the first child of a sitting US president to attend a public school since 1906. She still is. End quote. It appears that the rich and powerful in this country spare no effort and money to send their children to mostly private elite schools and universities, as we just have seen in the still ongoing college admission scandal. Why is that? A colleague of mine at some point explained to me that moving from a university like mine to an Ivy League is next to impossible, because he said these universities only hire people who graduated from other Ivy Leagues. And sure enough, over the years, I've seen many of my colleagues who did graduate from Ivy Leagues move between jobs in different Ivy Leagues, but I have never seen a graduate from a non-Ivy League school get a job there. What my colleague suggested was that there is some sort of unspoken rule, which I had not been aware of, which sets Ivy League schools apart from the rest, not allowing for any crossovers. Money seems to be part of the story. If you take the 10 universities with the largest endowments, that is Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Princeton, MIT, UPenn, Texas A&M, University of Michigan, Columbia and Notre Dame in that order, and you sum up their endowments, you end up with a sum of about $180 billion. College endowments have had an average return of 6 to 7% over the past years. So together, these universities generate some $11 billion in annual revenue from their endowments alone. This is just over $1 billion per university per year. Note that only 2 of them are public. 5 are Ivy Leagues, and all are top ranked. Compare this to the endowments of the top 10 public universities. That is UCLA, UC Berkeley, Virginia, Michigan, UC Santa Barbara, Chapel Hill, UC Irvine, Georgia Tech, Florida, William & Mary, and UC Davis, where it is certainly interesting that half of them are in California. Total endowment, $43 billion, about a quarter of the value of the ones I listed before. So what can all this money buy? I venture to say access and opportunity. I learned that some schools have offices that help students and faculty not just identify research grants, but assist them in the writing of their applications. As a result, it appears that some students attending rich universities don't have to worry at all about funding to conduct their dissertation research. Some universities apparently write application letters for their graduating students to make sure these letters are well composed, contain no mistakes, thus increasing the chances for their graduates to find a job. Even without this extra service, it appears that graduates from Ivy League universities don't have much trouble finding jobs at research universities, while decent jobs for non-Ivy League graduates are harder and harder to come by. A colleague from Duke University once told me that grad students there have $5,000 per semester to invite authors of newly published books so they can discuss it with them and get to know the author personally, thus building up important professional networks. And then I learned that a colleague of mine from a rich private school charges $10,000 to give a talk. Needless to say, I couldn't invite him. So it appears that rich, mostly private, elite universities can buy access and opportunity for their students and faculty and principal work. Money, of course, is not everything. Connections matter. Social capital, if you will, strong and weak ties, networks, or clientelism, if you feel less triumphant about the exceptionalism of the global north. I also had to learn this gradually during my career. Maybe first when I applied repeatedly and unsuccessfully to participate in the annual qualitative methods training at the University of Syracuse. At the time, I was an active member of the newly founded American Association of Political Science Qualitative Methods section. I had published in the newspaper, and I had participated in the training of grad students during an annual meeting. I felt that I had paid my dues and would surely secure a place for me. However, I was unsuccessful every time I applied, and none of my grad students whom I had encouraged to apply were ever accepted. I thought that this is just what it was, until I learned from a colleague at Duke that their department had 2 slots reserved for grad students every year. No application required. So connections matter, and I remember one of my CUNY Grad Center professors, it was actually Kajo, once telling us in a classroom that the main difference between getting a degree from CUNY compared to Columbia was that the parents of our classmates will not be able to offer us any jobs after we graduate. All of this is probably not news to you, but for me, all of this information came as a series of little shocks. The life of the uninformed is full of surprises, a professor once told me. All of these instances, to me, go diametrically against the very promise of this country, the promise I had experienced for myself. Little by little, they have cast a shadow over my belief in the power of public education to study your way out of the idiocy of rural life and poverty. These experiences and little shocks for me relate back to a British system of aristocratic social stratification, where name, rank, status, and money determine the achievements of individuals, not their effort. They somehow seem very un-American to me, even though I also had to learn that America always practiced very un-American things ever since its foundation. But still, after all, as an immigrant, relying on my own efforts, even while endowed with some racial and symbolic capitals, these examples undermine my belief in education as the great equalizer, making me think that somehow the very British belief in aristocracy is making a comeback. These examples, to me, suggest a sort of elite cabal aimed at reserving positions that really matter to the graduates from a small number of schools and universities. It appears that there is a glass ceiling, one that I was not aware of, which basically allows for the existence of all these colleges and universities nationwide, as long as they do not dispute access to real power with the very few universities that matter. It appears that the over 7,000 colleges and universities of this country were created so that their graduates find jobs, which is okay as long as they do not dispute the privilege of those who were born with them, who are able to buy into them. So don't get me wrong, I certainly understand why someone wants to earn a degree from a private elite university, and I do not want to blame them for making such a choice, which after all is very rational. I even advise applicants who want to come and earn their PhD with me to try to get into a Ivy League or top-ranked school first. I do not want to blame people who have to play by the rules for the way things are, but I do think it is important to question and challenge these rules. So to conclude this train of thought about education, what is privatization and elitism doing to higher education? It is hoarding opportunities for the rich and the already privileged, offering access and support to those who already enter the system privileged with different capitals: financial, social, cultural, racial, and gender. It appears that a two-tier system of slowly